Alright, obviously I'm a rookie at this because this is my third attempt. So starting off here, giving a go at this video blog, while I drive around and my head is spinning with a million different things. I figured I'd get it out. But however, it did take something extraordinarily special to motivate me enough to finally start getting some of these thoughts out, and that would be, of course, Star Wars. Now, I want to preface this by saying that there's a lot of people out there who think they're the biggest Star Wars fans, and people that know me know that that is the case. However, I know there are many people equal, maybe none above, but some equal to my fandom. I have probably seen the movies legitimately 1,000 times, especially the older ones. I was a fan of the prequels, other than Jar Jar Binks. I thought, plus I was respecting George Lucas's. It was his art, his baby. So, however, I did rent out the entire theater, the last two new trilogy movies, for my birthday, because they both came out around December 20th, which is my birthday. And I, filled the theater with friends and family and had an amazing time. Now, I am going to say that I am working from memories from over a year or two ago, as I work through my analysis of the films. The original one, Force Awakens, I remember that we all kind of had the same opinion, which was that it was fantastic to see the Star Wars stuff on the big screen, blah, blah, blah. However, it was just really a rehashing of the old stories, done with new characters. There wasn't anything fresh, anything new. I would have liked to have seen them go in a completely different direction. They didn't do that, but it was at least left at the precipice of being able to break one direction or the other for the follow-up movie. I was hopeful that they would kind of establish these characters based on the characters that worked in the earlier movies and kind of go from there in a new direction. I thought option number 2 was they would just continue to rehash the story again, kind of an Empire Strikes Back of those same characters. Never in my wildest imagination did I foresee that they would, in essence, hand the franchise over to someone who, in my opinion, I don't know if he ever even watched any of the movies. Ryan Johnson, whatever his name is, however you pronounce it. I don't know any Ryan spelled like that, so it's got to be Rion. I'm sure he says, I'm Rion. But the utter shock that I had watching the second film in a room full of friends and everyone saying, after the movie, wasn't it so great, and thanks for having us, and then I just had to play along because it's my birthday, and all these people came out, and I don't want to be like, I'm utterly disappointed. But when we got home, my parents and I and a few other friends were able to fully dissect this movie. Now, I'll break this down into two things. One, I want to analyze it from the standpoint of Star Wars, and then I also want to analyze it from the point of looking at just generalized film writing in general, where it fails miserably in both. And I think as people are leading up to this new film coming out, there's all this excitement, and there were a lot of people, obviously the scores were terrible, the critic scores weren't, because I'm sure they got paid for those, and it hit a lot of the talking points of the time, the agenda for Hollywood, and so they loved that, but they didn't actually bother to look at it from a Star Wars perspective and from a writing perspective. I start just basically from the very first scene, when there's like a joke. First of all, the character, the leader of this Medieval Republic. I've tried to literally block the entire movie out of my mind. It brings me to the point also that, there's a lot of remakes or sequels happening to old films that were in essence concluded by their original artist, writer, and the films were done in their minds. And whether they got sold off, or in the case of George Lucas, sold off to Disney, and Disney's just trying to cash in on this huge cash cow, which is Star Wars everything. Like, don't you as a consumer, as the eye of the beholder, don't you have the right to kind of pick and choose what you believe the story to be? Especially once it leaves the original artist's direction hands, and it's no longer that which you originally fell in love with. And I think this is the perfect example. Like, George Lucas, these aren't his stories. They don't follow, from what I've heard and read online, they don't follow in what he would have foreseen to go with the next trilogy. And he's been extremely disappointed in where they went with, understandably, especially this last movie. So don't you get to kind of choose? They've redone and now Terminator. They've redone this and that. They've kind of added onto it. And instead of kind of, just taking a great concept or idea and adding onto it in a totally different direction, they just end up continuing on stories that already were concluded, that had the, beautiful happy ending. Return of the Jedi and the full 6-course meal that that went through and concluded at the end with that wonderful dessert of father-son connection and the hero coming full circle and concluding all that. No, you don't have to buy into somebody else's idea. I'll give you an example of a movie I recently saw, Dr. Sleep, which I thought, well, how are you going to continue the story? I'd never read Stephen King's follow-up book, Dr. Sleep, that he wrote many years later after The Shining. That, I thought, how are you going to continue that movie? There's not really much to continue. I mean, obviously they left the daughter, the son and the wife seemingly survived the incident at the lodge. But how are you going to continue that? And that's what I loved about Dr. Sleep, is that they took the concept, a couple of the characters, and a couple little mini stories that were within the main story, and then they took that in a whole different direction and expanded on it and made it this wonderful kind of add-on story separate of the original story. Didn't ruin anything from the original story, didn't need to continue it, it had already concluded. Bam. That to me was perfect. So back to the second Star Wars movie from last year. It opens with a slapstick comedy routine amongst this little whiny millennial ginger who's like throughout the entire first movie that we saw him, and then of course in the second one is just kind of throwing a little temper tantrum all the time. Kind of reminded me as a character of someone you would have seen in Spaceballs, which led me immediately, if it wouldn't have been for him being in the first movie, that opening scene, I thought I was watching a preview for the next Spaceballs movie. I thought maybe they snuck it in there, like, oh, some deep pockets, let's just throw this in there and they're going to do another Spaceballs movie. Because, please, somebody tell me, when in any of the other movies, the other 6, 7 movies, were the bad guys funny? When were they funny? They were never funny. The comedy was saved for the hero characters. Han Solo had a bunch of funny parts. Princess Leia had some funny parts with the Wookiee and the this and the that. But never once, across the board, was there any comedy or comedic lines delivered by bad guys. And it opens with this funny thing where I can't even remember. He can't hear him. Can't hear him on the thing, and he has a little tantrum. And I thought, what the hell am I watching right now? Is this a Spaceballs preview? And I seemingly thought it can't get any worse from here, so it's only got to get better. Somehow, it seemingly got worse. Now, that leads me to the second part that kind of parallels Spaceballs. So I had the luxury of seeing the movie a couple days before it opened to the public because we rented out the entire theater. So after watching the movie and looking at the main story plot line, which in essence, if you want to break it down, was the ship is running out of gas and they have to keep moving around so that they don't get caught, but eventually they're going to run out of gas. Now, I'm not the extreme Star Wars nerd that has read every book and watched all the offshoot cartoons and this and that. That's really, that I dove into how does everything work in the galaxy of Star Wars. However, I do look at it from the generalized perspective of how does the average super Star Wars fan view these things. And so I had the luxury of being able to go back and ask some friends of mine who I considered hardcore Star Wars people who had yet to have seen the movie, because I saw it first, and said, hey, I just want to ask you a question. I'm not going to ruin anything, no spoilers. But how do you perceive that everything in the Star Wars galaxy operates as far as like power? Like, how do the ships run? And every one of them told me the exact same thing in a roundabout way. That there was some sort of, whether it be nuclear fission or some kind of harnessing of the galaxy's energy in a way that we don't understand, that these things just worked. Unlimited energy source of some kind. Nobody said they ran on gas or some sort of gas. Nobody. So for me to, in essence, base an entire story around the fact that eventually this ship is going to run out of gas also reminded me of Spaceballs. Because remember they're like in the Millennium Falcon wannabe vehicle in Spaceballs with John Candy and the other guy, and they stopped at like a intergalactic shell station or something. Like, that's the first thing that came to my mind when they're talking about gassing up this ship. Now, like I said, I can't remember all the details because I truly have tried to block both of the new movies out of my mind, so it doesn't ruin that which is the beautiful world of Star Wars created. So we've now created a story that is completely devoid of any understanding of the previous Star Wars worlds, and based it on something that nobody could comprehend. Now, it also leads me to things that I thought were completely out of place in the Star Wars universe. One being what Luke had become. Now, I understand that Luke was an anomaly in the Force and in the whole realm of Jedi being, in a sense that, he did have, just like Anakin, he had tendencies to be a little bit out of control and a little bit, should we say, manic in his behavior, which he had learned to harness specifically in Return of the Jedi. If you look at the difference between his character, the calmness, the groundedness that he portrayed in Return of the Jedi in comparison to the previous two movies, showed the growth that he had through that time. And so for me to believe, or for anybody who follows that character or follows and has an understanding of what it means to actually become that deeply intense, grounded Jedi, to think that he's like living on some rock somewhere, whining and crying and acting like a little sissy about everything and just being this ultra negative, just un-Jedi-like person was just unfathomable for me. And for Rey to show up and, go into, hey, I'm gonna tell you this, you're gonna teach me this stuff. And this was the other part that I thought was so strange. I mean, it fit in perfectly with like the new age progressive millennium culture thinking, which is like, oh, You should just be able to show up and get these superpowers. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to have any talent or be anybody special, because that was the thing. You're nobody. You're just some bum when Kylo Ren, or whatever the hell his name is, tells her she's a nobody something or other. You know, it's like, if you look at the previous movies, like, you have to commit your entire life. That's what I loved about George Lucas's connection between the Jedi and, like, Far Eastern Buddhism, philosophy, whatever you want to call it, was that it took a lifetime of dedication to, like, become a Jedi. You had to give up all these certain things in life, kind of like a priest or a shaman or whatever would have to dedicate his life to the way of God or the universe, eliminate all these things, and then also dedicate himself to meditating and to learning different martial arts and all this stuff. Literally, she shows up on this island with some blue cow milk, weird animals. Luke's a crybaby, and she sits on a rock a couple times, and boom, all of a sudden she's like the most powerful Jedi in the world. Or seemingly, towards the end of the movie. Just happened. That, to me, doesn't fit in within the Star Wars story at all. Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense to my understanding of what it means to be a Jedi. I can't foresee... let me go back to the last movie. I understand that Harrison Ford came to them and said, I don't want to do any of these movies anymore. So I'll give you one, you kill me off, that's the end of it. It was sad that he left, that he had to go. The way that he left kind of made some sense. I mean, it's funny to me that there's so many similarities between a lot of the young characters, is that they're these like, cry baby, I'm so hurt, little millennial whiners. You know, Kylo Ren, the leader of the Republic, whatever his name is, that ginger, like, they're all just a bunch of crybabies. I don't know. That, to me, is the key to writing 101, is make your good and your bad characters likable. Like Darth Vader, Emperor Palpatine, like, those guys were badass, but they were likable. Like, you like them in a bad way, you know? None of the characters in this are likable, the bad guys. Mostly you just want to kick them in the dick or punch them in the face. I don't know. That's basic 101 writing. Like, make sure, and as an actor, like, the thing is even if you're playing a bad character, you like, make sure that I can connect with other characters, with the audience, and make them like me in some way. Totally lost in this particular movie. There's so many things from a writing perspective that are so off in this second movie. It's mind-boggling to me that this was handed over to somebody who doesn't even look like he doesn't look like he watched Star Wars, and doesn't look like he went through a remedial writing class of any sort. There's whole plot lines in this, like that whole offshoot where they go to the casino and then, you know, give the whole wonderful progressive theme that, like, oh, rich people are evil, they're terrible. Here we are in this place of extravagance and they're so terrible. Okay. And then that whole thing becomes a moot point because you think that Benicio del Toro's character is going to end up being this, like, Lando Calrissian type of guy who's a scoundrel and a scumbag, but then he kind of comes through at the end, or he betrays you at the end for some really good reasons. He's just like, nah, just wanted to do it for the money, see you guys, peace out, boom. That whole storyline of 40 minutes with the stormtrooper turned whatever his name is, and the little Asian girl, that whole side story is nothing. It literally meant nothing. 40 minutes of absolutely nothing to the story. Nothing. And then, of course, they had their little love connection at the end, which came out of nowhere because you didn't foresee it in the two characters at all. At least if you knew how to write a script, you would create slowly some dynamic between the two characters. It went from, like, this ultimate, like, nerdy friendship to, oh, they love each other. Oh, okay, thanks for hitting me over the head with it. I'm glad you're such a subtle and, you know, crafted writer. Okay. What other things in that story made no sense to me? Oh, the bad guy. The bad guy, right? The little flaming Liberace bad guy. I don't even remember his name. Snoke or something? Snooky? Snooky? Skull? No, that's a dip. Whatever his name was, it's like he's this terrible guy, and you know, he's like this really imposing kind of holographic character earlier where you're like, God, a guy looks huge. And then when he actually show up to see him, he's like this bizarre, I thought, you know, he was one of the strangest characters. And the thing was, is he actually could have been something really awesome. They spent a movie and a half building this guy up, and then without finding anything out about him, his past, why he's there, how he got there, who he is, nothing. They just, boom, kill him off. Like, what? Wait, what? I thought he was this ultra-powerful guy, and then he doesn't foresee that this is going to happen to him, that there's any danger. He's not strong enough. Boom, all of a sudden, just, he's dead. Wait, what? Trash.